In this video, we're going to look at how to add and subtract integers, positive or negative or zero. So first we look at some real-life examples. When we have a positive integer, we can think of it as credit. When we have a negative integer, we can think of it as a debt we have. So when we add these numbers, so some of them could be positive, some of them could be negative. So there are 4 cases. They could be both positive, so that means it's credit plus credit. They could be both negative, so that would be the case of debt plus debt. One of them could be positive, the other is negative. So we may have either credit plus debt or debt plus credit. And so there are different ways to help us to add integers. So we could use number lines and or just use real life examples. And I found credit and debt is an easy way to help us to remember the rules. So as we add a credit and credit, we know we're going to get larger credit. So let's say if you have $3 in one bank and $5 at another bank, and then when you add them, you're going to get $8 in both banks. So you get larger credit. So here's the rule. When we add two credits, two positive numbers, credit is positive, and when we add them, we get still credit. So which if it's still credit, and then we have a plus sign. So when we add two positive numbers, we keep the sign, we keep the plus sign, the positive. And then we are going to, since we're going to end up with the larger credit, which means we're going to add these two numbers. All right, now next we look at debt plus debt. So if you overdrafted your bank account $3 and at one bank and $5 overdrafted at $5 at another bank, and together you overdrafted 3 plus 5, which is $8. So when you have two debts, or you can think of it as owing somebody money. So if you owe one person $3, owe another person $5, together you owe more. So that's why the answer is a larger debt. So that tells us debt plus debt, and debt we know it's negative. Debt is a negative number, and so the answer will still be debt, because when you're combining two debts, you're still going to end up with debt. So that's why the sign is still going to be negative. But for the numbers, $3 debt, $5 debt, you're going to add those two numbers to get a larger debt. So the first two cases, when you have either both positive or both negatives, they have the same sign, you will keep the sign. Whether it's plus, you keep plus, minus, you keep it as minus. But for the end numbers, you're going to just add those two digits without the signs. We call those numbers without the signs absolute values. And now let's look at the other two cases. So what if one of them is credit, the other is debt? So which means one of them is plus, the other is minus. And in this case, it depends. It depends whether you have more credit or more debt. So if you have more credit, it's going to pay off the debt, and also you still have some left over, maybe. But if you have, let's look at the other case. If you have a larger debt, and then you will end up in debt because your credit is not going to be enough to cover your debt. So in this case, we have to look at both numbers to compare, to see which number is bigger, whether the credit is bigger or the debt is bigger. So if the credit is bigger, you're still going to be in credit, so you're going to take the sign in front of the larger number. But if the number in front, if the number in front of the negative number, if you have more debt, or in other words, the number after the minus sign compared to the number after the plus sign and is bigger, that means you have more debt, and then you will have and will still be in debt. So we're going to the rule for these two cases, the rule is different. So we're going to have to pick. We don't get to keep because we have two different signs. So we have to pick the sign of the larger number. And once we pick the sign, we have to subtract these two numbers. And if you think about, you have $3 credit, but $5 debt, that means you still be in debt because 5 is larger than credit. And then you have to compare how much more debt do you have than your credit. So you're going to do subtraction because you compare two numbers. So $5 debt minus $3 credit, that will give you $2 debt, which is going to tell us the answer is going to be negative. But if we switch, then let's say we have $5 credit, but only $3 debt. So the $5 will be enough to cover the debt. So you're going to, the 5 is bigger than 3. So you're going to pick, the answer will be credit. You pick the sign in front of 5, which is plus. And then you're still going to compare how much more credit do you have than the debt. So you're going to do 5 minus 3. So these are the two sets of rules. For the first two cases, if they have the same signs, you always keep the sign. So usually when you do this type of questions, you want to determine the signs first. So plus plus, keep it. Minus minus, keep it. And then you try to deal with the numbers, the digits. So you're going to add the numbers. So if you have 5 and 3, you add a 5 and 3. If you have 5 and 3 here, you add a 5 and 3. But for the second case, when the signs are different, plus minus or minus plus, you're going to you are going to first pick the sign in front of a larger number, and then you're going to subtract the numbers. So 5 minus 3 and 5 minus 3. Okay, so now let's look at some examples here. So positive 6 plus positive 2, the answer is positive 8. I put the rules right here for your reference. So remember, first we check the sign. They're both positive. So we keep the sign, which is plus. And then we add these two digits, 6 and 2, to get 8. And this is the credit plus credit equals larger credit case. So look at 6 and 2, we get a larger number, 8. That tells us we have to add them. And the plus sign tells us it's credit. The credit tells us it's a plus sign. Now, in the next case, when one of these plus, the other is minus, it's like credit plus debt case. And notice that credit is larger because 6 is larger than 2. So we have larger credit than debt. So larger credit plus smaller debt equals still credit. So that's why out of these two plus and minus signs, we're going to pick this one because 6 is larger than 2. So we're going to pick this sign, not going to pick the sign in front of 2 because 2 is smaller. And we pick that sign, and then we have to subtract because you want to see credit is larger, debt is smaller, but you want to see how much bigger is your credit. So you can do subtraction. 6 minus 2, that gives us the number 4. So when we have the same sign, you do addition. When we have different signs, you have to do subtraction. The next one will be still different signs. So first, let's pick the sign. So still 6 is bigger than 2. We pick the sign in front of 6, which gives us minus. And again, if we have different signs, and we have to subtract 6 and 2 to get 4. Again, this time we have larger debt, but smaller credit. So we still end up in debt. The answer is negative. Now, finally, when we have debt plus debt, we know we're going to get larger debt. So keep the sign minus minus, we keep the minus sign. Then we're going to combine the two debts, which means we have to add 6 and 2 to gives us 8. Okay, so this is how we add sign numbers. Now, next we're going to look at the subtraction. So for addition of sign numbers, apparently we have two sets of rules. So if you memorize these rules, and you can do all the problems. But if you have trouble remembering the rules, always go back to the credit and debt example. So now the subtraction, we actually only have one rule. We don't have two sets of rules. So to subtract the sign numbers, we add the opposite of the number being subtracted. What it means is we're going to look at these 4 subtraction problems in a second here. So what we do is first number, we keep it. So here is a quick way for us to memorize this rule. So this might sound a little complicated. what do you mean by add the opposite of the number being subtracted? And it's kind of long. So we are going to rephrase this rule as keep, change, change. So keep means you keep the first number. So plus 6, you're going to keep it. Plus 6, keep it. And change means you change the minus sign to plus. Because the opposite, add the opposite, which opposite of minus is going to be, we're going to add. So we're going to change. We always change subtraction to addition. And then take the opposite of the number being subtracted. So this is the number we're subtracting, being subtracted. We're going to take the opposite of that, which means if they give you plus, you change it to minus. If they give you minus, you're going to have to change it to plus. So the second change means you change the sign of the number being subtracted. So that's I should use the red color to indicate the changes we did. The first number we keep it, and then we change minus to plus, and then we flip the sign. We change the sign of the number being subtracted, which is the second number here. Okay, now we converted the subtraction problem to an addition problem. And now we can use the addition rule, which we just learned. So in this case, we have $4 credit plus $2 debt. So more credit, so the answer should be positive. And how much more? 6 minus 2 gives us 4. Okay, so we can use this rule, keep, change, change, to help us to do the rest of the question. So we keep this number, keep, plus 6. But we're going to change the minus sign to plus. And then we're going to change the sign of the number being subtracted. So we have a minus here, so we're going to have to change it to plus. So we always do two changes together. So now it's 6, literally it's credit plus credit, we get larger credit. Now next question, we same thing, keep minus 6, do 2 sign changes, change this to plus. We always change minus to plus. But then we have to change whatever the following sign to its opposite, plus to minus, minus to plus. So now this is the case of credit, debt plus debt gives us larger debt. Now finally, we do the same thing. So keep, so we do keep and then change, change. Now we end up with more debt, larger debt, $6 debt plus $2 credit. So we pick the sign of the larger number that gives us minus, and then do 6 minus 2 that gives us the answer -4. So these are the rules. So now we're going to look at something called a simplified writing. A lot of times the plus signs can be omitted. For example, this plus sign really doesn't do anything. This plus sign doesn't do anything. So we can simplify it as just 6 plus 2, which is what we usually see in our math books. And same thing here. This minus plus doesn't really do anything, so we can get rid of it. Now here, when we have a plus sign and a minus sign together, and we can also get rid of the plus sign. And remember, minus sign can never be omitted. But a plus sign, if you have 2 signs together, one is plus, then you can omit that. So the second question can be just written as 6 minus 2. And in this case, again, minus sign cannot be omitted. But when you have 2 plus signs, you can omit one of them. So that's just going to be -6 plus 2. And the parentheses, we can get rid of it. And the same, so right here, same thing. This plus sign cannot be omitted. This minus sign cannot be omitted, but this plus sign can be. So we're going to omit that. So the answer, we get -6 minus 2. But when we do a lot of questions, you might get confused. How do we do -6 minus 2? So when you have the simplified writing, you might want to put a plus sign in front of the second number. And that will turn this into addition question, which makes it easier to solve. Okay, so we can add a sign. For example, what's the answer of 12 minus 15? We can, if you know the answer, that's great. You can go ahead and write down the answer directly. For those students with trouble, you can put a plus sign because the plus sign is omitted. So literally, we're doing $12 credit plus $15 debt. 15 is larger than 12. So let's take the sign in front of 15, which gives us a minus. And then we subtract 15 and 12, we get 3. So that's how we change the simplified writing back, add the plus signs back. Same thing here.